Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. After a full day criticizing two Indian sports officials arrested in Glasgow, the charges against both of them have been dropped for lack of evidence. So is the media, and by that way also many sports officials and sportsmen themselves, left with terrible egg on their face? And do we owe the officials an apology? That's the key issue in part 2. But first, Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Nepal is by all accounts considered a great success. But is this impression borne out by the actual results? Or is it a reflection of the euphoria the visit has generated? That's the first debate tonight. And now joining me to discuss the Prime Minister's visit to Nepal are two former Indian ambassadors to that country, Shiv Mukherjee and Jayant Prasad. I'm also joined from Kathmandu by the author of Battles of the New Republic, a contemporary history of Nepal, Prashant Jha. And soon to join us, the editor of Annapurna Post, Yuvraj Ghimire. Jayant Prasad, Prime Minister Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to have paid a bilateral visit to Nepal for 17 years. Beyond that long time period, how significant is this visit?
Karan, this visit resonated extremely well with the people and the politicians of Nepal, cutting across the entire political spectrum. President Ram Baran Yadav actually told Prime Minister Narendra Modi that he had won the hearts of all Nepalese with his speech in the Constituent Assembly. So as a goodwill visit, it could not have been better.
Okay, and what do you think about the visit in terms of substance once you discount the euphoria?
Well, you know, one is to talk about the deportment of the Prime Minister, the statements that he made, but he also carried with him some concrete offers, and these concrete offers were, first of all, an offer of concessional assistance, Exim Bank credit cover of $1 billion. And the signal to Nepal was not that we had lifted the aid package from $250 million to $1 billion extra, but the signal was that India was ready to partner Nepal, that India was incomplete without Nepal and Nepal would be incomplete without India. It was a signal that India is ready to share in Nepal's success and consider Nepal's success as its own success.
All right.
And the hit that he spoke about also goes in the same direction.
Yuvraj Ghimire, I'll come to the substance of the visit and how meaningful that substance is. But first, at the level of euphoria, how has the visit been received in Kathmandu by the many different political parties that comprise A, your government, and then B, your constituent assembly? How have they responded to this visit?
Karan? And the fact that a Prime Minister of India next door visits Nepal in 70 years itself was a message. And but then in terms of what he said there in the Constituent Assembly, he expressed kind of concern over he wanted an orderly constitution, political stability, a safe environment for investment, and he also kind of promised that India was willing to do anything that India could do, but there should be some initiative from Nepal. There's all kind of because he interacted with various sections of the society, not only Constituent Assembly and all that, business community and all that. So it has been received quite well, quite positively so far.
Okay. We seem to have a... I'm going to stop you there, Yuvraj. We have a very bad line to you. I'm going to go to my next guest, and hopefully in the meantime my producers will be able to patch up and we'll have a better connection. Prashant Jha, Mr. Modi, it seems, made a significant attempt to appeal to Nepali sentiment. He spoke in Nepali when he addressed the Constituent Assembly. He referred to mythological connections linking Nepal with Jari Booty, with Hanuman and Lakshman. He spoke about Gurkha soldiers sacrificing their life for India. He went and visited the Pashupatinath temple. He's committed himself to going to Lumbini next time he goes. And then, of course, he made a great point of stopping his convoy at least 4 or 5 times to step out and shake hands with people on the roadside. So beyond politicians, beyond the government, how have the people of Nepal responded to Mr. Modi?
Karan, I think you've hit the rub of the issue. The problem in the Nepal-India relationship has been the trust deficit at the political level. At the people-to-people level, there is immense interaction, but there is a strand in Nepali society and Nepali polity which has been distrustful of India. And I think more than anything else, the significance of this visit lies in the fact that Modi directly reached out to the Nepali people to erode this trust deficit. He, in his speech, tried to allay all their apprehensions and doubts and misperceptions that may have cropped up about Indian intentions. You know, this may sound absurd, but there is a section in Nepal which felt that India was trying to appropriate Lumbini, that India was not recognizing that Buddha was born in Nepal. Just by repeating that 4 times and recognizing that simple fact, that drew the most applause in the Constituent Assembly. By mentioning, you know, there is this fear that India wants to monopolize in Nepal's water resources. And Mr. Modi said, look, it's your resources, you develop it, and we don't want to buy it. We don't want it free, we will buy it, and this will make you prosperous. And till that point, we are willing to supply you electricity to meet your shortages. So no other PM at this level, at the political level, has understood that there are misperceptions, doubts that exist in the Nepali psyche, and have made an attempt to reach out beyond the politicians directly to the Nepali people. And I think in one stroke, Modi has, I think, it's eroded substantially the politics of the anti-India forces here, be it the far right or the far left. And this will be and now the ball is in Nepal's court.
All right, you certainly are underlining the fact that Mr. Modi has had an enormous impact in winning over the faith and trust of the Nepali people. Let's then come, Shiv Mukherjee, to some of the political statements the Prime Minister has made. First of all, in his meeting with Prime Minister Koirala, he said he was happy to give Nepal a blank check to amend the 1950 treaty any way Nepal wanted to do so. How do you, as a former ambassador to Nepal, respond to that?
Well, this is something that has quite a history. I mean, this is not a recent thing which Nepali leaders have talked about reviewing or amending or even abrogating the 1950 Treaty of Friendship, Peace and Friendship. The fact is that right from the time that it was mooted, India has always taken the position that we are perfectly ready to discuss it, to review it, to modify it as, and we are ready to engage with Nepal on that. My take on this is simply that this is used by a certain section of the leadership or certain leaders at particular points of time to drum up, it's a populist thing, to drum up some instant popularity by pointing to Big Brother when things get a little tough or at times of an election or when you need popular support. So this is not to be taken very, very seriously. Nepal knows fully well, even if it doesn't say so, that the 1950 treaty has been enormously in its interest, that 6 or 7 or 8 million Nepalese work in India and are treated like Indian citizens. Can you imagine what would happen if they return to Nepal and be a burden on the state? And it is their remittances that sustain. So that is, and for this to be reiterated at the highest level by Prime Minister Modi was a clear message to Nepal that we are perfectly comfortable with reviewing it. Most of the treaty has gone away by attrition anyway, including the defense paragraphs.
Let me stop you then, bring in Jayant Prasad. Jayant Prasad, even though the Nepalis raised the issue of the treaty as a populist measure for domestic political concerns of their own, which we understand fully, nonetheless, how reassuring would it have been for Prime Minister Koirala, and I assume very soon the rest of the Nepali political firmament will hear, that India, as far as Mr. Modi is concerned, is willing to change it comprehensively, that Nepal has a blank check. Is that one of those gestures that perhaps earlier Prime Ministers were not so fulsome in making, which Mr. Modi has made and therefore achieved some sort of bridge over this problem?
Well, I must say that this is one area in which Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not the first person to have said this. What he has done is that he has said that Nepal must settle this problem as fast as it wishes to, and that India would be responsive immediately, that he has taken the trouble not to respond to a Nepali request, but to come forward and say that we have heard that you want to revise the treaty, and let's have a treaty in conformity with the 21st century, and if there are things that need to be changed, we are willing to change it. I think that's a good message, but this is a message which the Nepalese political leadership have had for over a decade now.
All right. But it's therefore a reiteration by Mr. Modi as opposed to something new that he's offering them. Yuvraj Gamile, Mr. Modi has also made some significant comments about the constitution that Nepal has been struggling to give itself for over 5 years. After clearly saying that the ongoing peace process was an internal Nepali matter and should be concluded as per Nepal's own wishes, he then said, and I'm quoting him, "You decide what needs to be done. India will stand by you." Is this a welcome sign that as far as Nepal's future character as a democracy is concerned, India has no clear preferences? It will abide by whatever Nepal chooses for itself? Because this is an issue you've often written about in your articles, wondering whether India will take sides with one side or another. Is it now reassuring to know India is not going to take sides at all?
Yeah, it's quite reassuring, the way he expressed himself about India recognizing Nepal as a sovereign country and reminding the Constituent Assembly members that it's their duty to write the constitution as fast as possible, and that the world that believes in democracy is also looking towards Nepal, how they will take the peace process and constitutional writing to a logical conclusion. Yes, there have been comments, and there are apprehensions and reservation in Nepal about Indian government agencies, bureaucracy getting involved in internal politics and rather than developmental activities and all that. It is obvious. So he made it very clear, and also there was a bit departure on the policy that India was pursuing in Madhes, which he made very clear when he made leaders from Madhes today. There are two welcome departures, and also it also makes Nepali politicians more responsible now. That it's their responsibility to finish constitution writing within the time frame they have.
Now, Prashanja, without naming them, Mr. Modi praised Prachanda, Bhattarai and the Maoists for giving up the bullet and taking to the ballot. In return, Prachanda called his speech touching and very inspiring. Mr. Bhattarai said that Mr. Modi had won the hearts and minds of the Nepali people. Do you think that once again Mr. Modi, by clever praise at the appropriate time, has built a bridge with the Maoists? That was a relationship that was very close at one point of time, but it got rather fractured and damaged in the last couple of years. Has Mr. Modi restored some of the fraternity to that relationship?
Absolutely, he has succeeded in building bridges with the Maoists. There were sections within the Maoists who were apprehensive because of BJP's ideological worldview. They felt that there could be hostility from the new government. They were not sure whether the new government in Delhi would remain committed to the process of political change in Nepal and the agenda of the Federal Democratic Republic, which the Maoists first championed. But Mr. Modi, by praising the Maoists yesterday in his speech, by reiterating his support for what Nepal has already decided, a Federal Democratic Republican Constitution, has allayed those apprehensions. I'd like to just share with you this afternoon when Prachand and Baburam Bhattarai met Mr. Modi, they told him that they were really satisfied with his speech and that they did not know how well he knew Nepal because he was away from, he was not even in Delhi, he was in Gujarat, and they were not sure about his knowledge of the significance and enormity of the political transition, but his speech has put those doubts to rest. And in return, Mr. Modi privately told them that what you have done is a mahan thing, a great thing of moving into this process and engaging with the democratic process. And he told them that he was not sure about the present, but history would judge them very well for this. So I think this is excellent news because it indicates that Delhi would not as you indicated, play favorites. If the Maoists rise as a political force domestically, they would be happy to do business with them.
Clearly, it seems that Mr. Modi, in terms of the content of his speech, in terms of the clever way he's reached out to different constituencies in Nepal, has won laurels for himself and succeeded in building bridges. Let's then come, Shiv Mukherjee, beyond politics to the economic and trade aspects of this visit. Now, Mr. Modi has extended a $1 billion line of credit to Nepal, and this is over and above the earlier lines of credit. But I noticed that the power trade agreement, which people were hoping would be signed and finalized, has not been signed, though the two countries have exchanged terms of reference regarding the Pancheshwar Development Authority. How do you sum up what he's achieved in terms of trade and economic relations?
Well, firstly, and obviously the sheer size of the concessional credit line offered is 4 times what was on the table beforehand. So that itself is extremely significant in a Nepal which is, to put it bluntly, its budget is shot to hell. Just remittances from Nepalese abroad are a significant part of that budget. Industry, through the years of insurgency and the political volatility over the last few years, the economy has actually shrunk. So this should be seen as a major takeaway from the visit. I would like to offer one cautionary thought, which is that in the past as well, and here I would refer to what the panelists said about what Mr. Modi has achieved in terms of what he said. The fact is, all these messages have been given before. The fact that Nepal owns the peace process, the fact that we are there only to help, and the priorities also will be set by Nepal, all that has been said. The great achievement is that this is being said at the highest level by a Prime Minister who has made it very clear that relations with Nepal are of the greatest importance, and the symbolism of it is therefore extremely important.
Okay.
Now, the economics is self-evident, because half of Nepal's foreign trade is half of Nepal's investment comes from India. 2/3 of its trade is with India. The cautionary note I was going to strike was simply that, having promised all this, having said all this, a reiteration at the highest level of working with Nepal for the good of Nepal, which is for the good of India, we must implement these things on the ground.
Okay.
The story of Indian help to Nepal is littered with good intentions and lack of implementation, which has led to an image that we should not have, which is rife in Africa, which is rife across Nepal, which is that India promises but China delivers.
All right.
This is something we must cure.
That's a very good point, and in the light of that particular point, Jayant Prasad, I want to ask you about that HIT formula that Mr. Modi announced during his speech to the Nepali Parliament. The HIT comprises, in fact, highways, information ways and transways. And then in addition, he talked about buying hydroelectric power from Nepal. He talked about reducing telecom rates so that people could ring and go beyond just namaste. And he talked also about increasing tourism and how Nepal could benefit hugely from potential 1.2 billion Indian tourists. And all of that certainly made good rhetoric, it made great speech making. But are there concrete steps behind all of this to fulfill these intentions, or do you share the slight note of skepticism from Shiv Mukherjee that things are more often spoken about and very rarely delivered?
There are two problems. One is the lack of delivery of many projects which India has had a hand in the past, and we have to really lift our act to try and find ways of implementing proposals and projects which we get into. But these are areas where Nepal itself has presented ideas and Indian companies have come forward with bids. For example, on highways, just as the Chinese built the Kodari highway several decades ago linking Tibet, Lhasa with Kathmandu, we need to link up Kathmandu also with the Indian plains, with Bihar. And for that, the Nepalese want a fast track road connecting Kathmandu to the Tarai. And there are two Indian firms which are in the race, both leading firms in India, L&T and IL&FS. They want to build an international airport in the Tarai, which will have a great clientele from North Bihar and North UP. They want to build transmission lines, and we are providing transmission lines in the short term really to supply electricity to Nepal during the lean period, because believe it or not, Nepal's electricity production is 1/4% of its hydro potential, which is in the lean period dips below 500 megawatt. So we are going to commit to provide them electricity during the lean period when these lines are operational very soon. By the end of 2016, we will be fully in a position to do that. But in the hope that once Nepal gets its act together and chooses not to remain poor and develop its hydro resources, then we would stop living in darkness, as Prime Minister Modi said.
Very quickly on that last point, and I want you to give me, Yuvraj Ghumere, a short, sharp answer because we're running out of time. Why is it that Nepal has reservations about Indian companies getting involved in the building of hydroelectric projects in Nepal? I gather that's one of the things that holds back a greater, deeper relationship in the terms of hydroelectric supply of power from Nepal to India. A quick answer.
I don't think there is reservation about it. What Ambassador Prasad, hinted also. I think, this is somewhere something has gone wrong and both sides stand discredited over their failure to honor their promises and agreement in the past.
Okay.
So some proof that they are serious about it, they deliver what they promise has to be done. And I think these opportunities are there always for the two sides to work together towards prosperity.
All right. Prashant Jha, we have time just for about one last concluding question. I mean, one of the things I get as I've heard my four guests today on the show, that not only has Mr. Modi's visit been very successful in terms of the way the Nepali people have responded to him or in the way the Nepali political parties have welcomed his speech and praised him, but perhaps he's also done something to ameliorate the big brother image that India has in the eyes of many people in Kathmandu, that it interferes in politics, that it constrains the foreign policy of the country, that sometimes it dominates the economy. Would you say that Mr. Modi has managed to ameliorate all three of these concerns and therefore his visit has gone further to be what I would call in fact a qualified, if not an outright success?
Ambassador Prasad often used to say this when he was serving in Kathmandu. He said that Nepal is a far older nation state than India, and in that sense, Nepal is India's elder sister. That's, I think, a good formulation. What Mr. Modi has been able to do definitely is send out a message, a clear message that this is a sovereign country. We're not going to interfere in your business. But in the speech, for example, yesterday, he did give some advice about the constitution, right? He said you need a rishi-like mind. You need to be inclusive. You need to write a constitution that is beneficial to all segments of society. So I think that is going to be the broad Indian approach, which is they will be engaged with Nepali political process. They will be engaged with and they will advise and suggest, but they will not prescribe specifics. And I think that itself will go a long way in improving the image that you talked about.
One last question, and I want you to answer really with one sentence. Would you therefore, both as a Nepali as well as a journalist, say this visit is a success, or is that overstating it?
This visit is a super success. That is the term that a couple of MPs used to me as they walked out of the Constituent Assembly. They called it a super duper hit, and I have no reason to dispute that. I have never seen India received so warmly in Nepal in the last decade that I have been covering this relationship, and I have never seen Indian advice being received so warmly. There is a lot of hope, and I think both countries need to build up on this momentum.
Thank you very much indeed for that superlative conclusion. My thanks also to my other three guests for joining me.